this is Sally Flashberger from the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities, and we're here with another Living Well Wednesday. We're excited to continue talking about caregivers during National Caregiver Month. And we're really excited. We're joined by, this week we're focusing on paid caregiving. And so we are joined by some great caregivers from one of our partners in the Living Well Grant, Headwaters. So we're going to hear a little bit from them, from Eric, Cody, and Steph. And then after that, we'll hear from the BPDD Executive Director, Beth Swedeen. She's going to talk about the governor's task force on caregiving. She was a member of that committee, and she's going to talk about some of the recommendations around paid caregiving that are in the report. So first, we want to welcome some of the staff from Headwaters. So we have Eric and Cody, who both work in supported living. And then we also have Steph, who has worked on our Building Full Lives initiative and also employment. So we're going to get started with them. And we had posed some great questions to them, but we really want to hear any experiences they want to share with us. So I thought we'll just kind of do a round robin, and maybe if you can introduce yourselves and maybe just talk to us about why you became a caregiver, why you ended up in this type of job. So why don't we start with Eric?
Sure. And let me know if you can hear me here. I got a pretty interesting start. This goes back to, this is my second year in college. This is 1993, so I'll date myself here a little bit. I had a roommate who had a job as a caregiver. And after several months of talking to him about his job, I needed a job too. And after hearing about this over and over, it sounded like something that would be worth looking into. So they ended up having an opening at the spot where my roommate worked, providing support to the same guy. And this individual had cerebral palsy, and I'd had no experience in working with people with disabilities at this point. And his disability was very visibly obvious. And this guy was a little bit older than me. He was a computer programmer. He was incredibly smart. And I took him out shopping out in town, different things in the community. And seeing the way that people treated him, it just kind of blew me away, the way that people would either, baby talk to him or talk to me instead of talking to him. And, 99% of the people that this guy encountered on a daily basis, he's smarter than. And, 99% of people treat him like, it just blew me away to see the way that people treated this guy. And so that was really what that started it all at that point. That's what I said, boy, I can do something here. I can make a difference.
Yeah, not just caregiver, but advocate also, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Cody, how about you? How did you get involved with caregiving?
Well, actually, I have a long history in my family of nurses and doctors. So I've just kind of grew up caregiving as well. After I graduated from college, I needed a job. My mom was working in an assisted living facility. So she got me a job working there, and that's just kind of the start of it. Then I moved on to childcare for a couple of years, and then I worked with children with disabilities there for the first time. And that was an interesting experience working with all the caregivers and doctors and therapists involved. And it was a world that I actually wanted to dive more into. So I went back to school and got a degree teaching children. And then I wanted to go back to not teaching, but working with the elderly, because I just found it more food for my soul. I felt that it was just something that I needed to do. So I've been working with older people and people with disabilities since then.
That's great. How about you, Steph?
Well, I grew up with a sister who has Down syndrome, even though I didn't know it then. We did a lot of things like Special Olympics and, stuff like that. And then I had my son who happened to be born on the spectrum. So I stayed home for about 10 years at home. I did a lot of trainings, a lot of teaching him. And I kind of got my groove with that. And then I got him where I wanted him. And so then I moved on and I thought, well, this is what I want to do. And I want to be able to help and advocate, because I did a lot of advocating for him with schools, teachers, doctors, because he didn't talk for the longest time. But there was a lot of training in there and I learned a lot. And so that's kind of where I got into this field more so, was after he was born. So, and I wanted to keep doing that and keep advocating for other people.
That's excellent. I think we'll go back the same way. So we'll start again with you, Steph. Tell us about the work that you're doing and what a typical day looks like. Now, I know things are not typical right now because it's COVID,
No,
but,
they sure are.
but maybe before COVID, and maybe even, I know Eric's got a story about COVID, but maybe even now with COVID.
So a typical day, well, now with COVID going on, it's a little bit, there's a lot more phone calls, a lot more Zooming. It's not a lot of in-person, which is a little bit harder. So you have to be flexible, a lot of flexible with everyone, just to get what you have to do, because some of them, aren't going out or doing things, but yet you still need to talk to them and touch base and still work with them. So flexibility is a lot, especially now. But even when it's not going on, you still have to be flexible too.
And what were I think I said at the beginning, you were doing employment and some of the building full lives. Do you want to tell us just a little bit about what you were doing?
With what again?
With the employment, you'd work on employment services, and can you just talk a little bit about that? Tell people what that is.
Okay, so I touch base with businesses and I work with people to help them achieve their goals, whether if they want to be a janitor or, just a housekeeper, or if they want to work in sales or something. I work with businesses to help them achieve that goal so that they're successful in their journey with employment.
Excellent. That's perfect. I know sometimes we get people on who maybe don't know exactly all the nuances. Cody, how about you? Tell us about what your work looks like and maybe what a typical day would be.
A typical day for me is, again, lots of phone calls, lots of emails. Recently, because of COVID, working from home, and I have 3 small children at home, so it has been a struggle. But number one thing, the clients do come first. The people come first. So, and flexibility is the biggest thing. I am more than willing to drop whatever I have going on to go and help someone that needs my help. Or if they say they don't have plans for Thanksgiving, I'll go and bring them a meal. If they're not feeling well, I'll bring them a bowl of soup. It's the kindness that drives me to do the best that I can. And even if it is more virtual, more phone calls, it's still, to my people, it means the world if I call them and just check in them for a 15-minute phone conversation.
So before COVID, what did a typical day look like?
I was out doing more direct cares, doing more appointments, taking people to their appointments. Still lots of phone calls and emails, but I was in the office more, able to get a lot of the paperwork end of it done.
Sure, right. And Eric, how about you? How about a typical day before and during COVID, maybe?
Well, I mean, there isn't really, I typically work a night shift. So Just with my situation, I do some other stuff too, but it hasn't changed a real lot, but I think, the flexibility, like they both said, and it's just important too. What I try to do is to just always be aware of, the person we're supporting and how it's affecting him, and how, certain changes he might be dealing with, and if he might need some support in different areas because of that. So I guess I guess I kind of, with my situation, I focus some more on some of the other areas.
So do you want to tell us your story about COVID and supporting a person?
It just, I don't know, we had a good time. We made the best of it.
Well, I don't think everybody knows what happened. So we heard maybe that you had to stay with the person for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. So one of the there's two guys that are roommates, are good buddies. They've lived together for a long time. One of them's in the hospital, so the guy's on his own, and he's asking about it. He wants his roommate back so bad, and anyway, it was a quarantine situation, and I ended up being there for 2 weeks with him. It was just the two of us, and we had a good time. We readjusted everything, the whole routine. We cooked a lot. We did different, we did things that I thought of, I know what his normal routine is. So I tried to think of things that we could do that were outside of his, what he would typically get to do. And, we ended up having a pretty good time. We figured out a way to, and we actually both had COVID. So we did really well. And it was just like, I guess it goes back to also being flexible, and then just, and putting that person first and thinking, what are they gonna, everybody's different. This person is a little bit less able than some people to be able to express, and especially to be able to initiate, something that might be fun. So then that's where my role comes in, as far as I come up with a bunch of suggestions. Hey, we could do, this, or I can tell based on just his facial expression which one we're gonna do, which one he wants to do. And so we make it fun, and we adapt, and we roll with it. So that's kind of what happened. It wasn't any like super hard, bad experience or anything like that. We had a good time.
I'm glad you're both healthy and everything turned out well regarding COVID. And it sounds like you obviously went well above and beyond what maybe you might have a normal caregiver might do. So we'll start again with you, Eric, and tell us what you enjoy about being a caregiver, and what maybe the biggest challenges or barriers you find being.
Go ahead and say what you were going to say.
I guess I was just going to say, it's not, when you said something about above and beyond, and it shouldn't be viewed that way. And maybe if it is, then it maybe shouldn't, if that's viewed as above and beyond, then it maybe should be not the right job for that person, I think. Because like I told you, we had fun, So I don't know. I don't know what else to say really about that.
So why do you enjoy being a caregiver, and are there any challenges or barriers that you face providing cares?
Yeah, I mean, there's just challenges with, with life, with life in general. And I like being a caregiver because I can make a difference in people's lives. Going again back to when I got that first job in 90, and back in 93, I was going to college for something different. I was at UW Stout, and I switched majors to, they happened to have a good voc rehab program, and did that. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew this, I could feel good about it, and I could make a difference in people's lives, and that's how it should be viewed. And it really is, it's kind of a pretty simple thing. You be a good person. If you're a good person, you want to do this, it's a good job for you. I got my daughter a t-shirt that says, It says, "Be the person your dog thinks you are."
That's a good idea.
And
Yeah.
if you care, if you have that attitude, then you're going to take the time to support people in the proper way. You're going to be thorough with assisting them with their cares. You're going to, if you care, you're going to take the time to learn the things you need to learn in order to support them. So it's really, I look at it as it's pretty simple, but super important, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Cody, how about you? What do you enjoy most about being a caregiver, and what, if any, challenges or barriers do you face?
I enjoy the most seeing the success on people's faces. I love making a difference in people's lives. It's like I said before, it's like food for my soul. It's something that I was meant to do. I don't look at this as caregiving as a job. I look at it as part of who I am, because it's just something I know I'm meant to do. I've tried other jobs out there that have, okay, they pay more, but I don't like the job. I have always gone back to caregiving because that's something I just absolutely love to do. It is, some of the challenges is not necessarily flexibility. How do I explain this? Sometimes education, finding the right tools to help people in a productive and meaningful way can sometimes challenging. I've been doing research for weeks on some topics, and there's just not enough out there for me to expand my knowledge.
That's great. That's why we're here with Living Well, to help you guys. Definitely. That is one of our goals with the grant, is to really help direct service providers have more professional development and more education, so you can, feel strong about your job. Steph, how about you? What do you enjoy about being a caregiver, and what are any challenges or barriers you have faced?
What was that last part?
Challenges.
What, if any, challenges or barriers have you faced in caregiving?
I think that the challenges that I find is, being able to work with staff as a team, and trying to be flexible with other staff on what you got going and what they got going, and trying to work that in together for everyone. And I didn't hear the first part of that question.
What do you enjoy most about being a caregiver?
I enjoy, so like with my son, he has a goal in life, and his goal is to have his own apartment and be on his own. So he's working towards it really hard, but he's got a lot of stuff to learn. So when I'm out in employment and I'm working with everyone, they have goals of their own of what they want to do. And when I have helped them successfully, sometimes with employment, you have to teach them how to advocate for themselves to the business, and get them to be successful that way. And then get them to be successful with working with their tasks and what they have to do. And sometimes there's lists that you got to incorporate, or, tools that you need. And sometimes those tools, like Cody said, are hard to find, but the best part is when you've helped someone get into that place, into that position, and met their goal, and they're just so thankful and so happy. And then you talk to them a year later and they're still in that position, and they're still so very happy there. That's, brings you happiness.
Absolutely. So we know that we have a caregiver shortage in Wisconsin and the nation. I mean, it's definite. So if there's other caregivers who see this, I just wonder, what advice would you give to someone who's considering becoming a caregiver? What would be the important things you would want to tell them about why this is a great profession? And Eric, we'll start with you.
Well, yeah, I mean, if once a person figures out if they're, if that's something that they're cut out for, and I guess something I think about is at any point in time, anybody that, doesn't already could end up with, a family member, a child, a spouse, a parent that all of a sudden is in a situation where they need, care. And you want to look at it, if you're a person that's going to care for, people as if they were, the way that you would want your family member cared for, then yeah, that's probably a good job for you. I guess advice to somebody starting out would be really get to know the person. And people have varying degrees of, it's a lot easier if the person you're supporting is able to provide that information themselves, and you're able to have dialogue and stuff like that. But even with folks that, and I guess I'd say especially with folks that aren't able to tell you a lot about themselves, find out as much as you can about that person, what that person likes, what foods they like, what kind of music they like, different experiences they've had in their life that have been positive, that have been negative. And that's gonna be a way for you to connect with the person in a way that's meaningful for them, and that's really important.
That's great. How about you, Cody?
To be flexible in yourself, in your caregiving styles, the adaptation of changes, their changes, your changes, how to handle anything that's thrown at you. You just got to be able to be flexible in those certain situations, because it's just like walking on quicksand. In 1 minute it could be you're flying high, and the next they're just down in the dumps, and you got to sit there and figure out what's going on through, like Eric said, sometimes they can't tell you exactly what's going on. So you have to really listen and to understand and nitpick and like put a story together to help them get through whatever they're going through. You're a support member. I'm a support member. You got to take the time, and you got to have flexibility and understanding.
That's great. How about you, Steph?
I think that you have to have a lot of patience. Things change day to day, even hour to hour with people. You got to have that patience. If you don't have patience, then I don't think that it would be the right position for you, because you have different people on different ends and doing different things, and have different situations that are constantly changing. So I think patience and flexibility is really huge with being a caregiver.
That's great. We did have a question. I think it came from Facebook. So people wanted to know how you take care of yourselves. So what do you do? Do you take vacations? So how do you make sure that you take care of yourselves? Because I think this is a really important piece.
It is an important thing. Especially like with me, I have my son who is on the spectrum, and then I work in this caregiving situation. So sometimes you need to take a break. You need to take a 5 and take a day out for yourself and go and do something all by yourself. Because sometimes you've had a long week, or things are just, your brain is just going and going and going and going. And even if it's just to go for a nice long walk, or, especially now you can't really go anywhere. So, but a nice long walk, or just, taking some time to read a book or something all by yourself, and put that phone and that computer away for a little bit, and just take a break. I think that's really important.
How about you, Cody or Eric? Do you have any strategies or things you do to take care of yourself?
I think recognizing it is really important. And I mean, you got to take care. If you can't, if you can't take care of yourself, how are you going to take care of someone else? And I think being aware of it and recognizing it, we all have our things that we do to we live in Rhinelander. It's a beautiful area. I spend a lot of time outside. There's a lot of beautiful woods. We have all our things that we do, but just recognizing it and being aware of it, I think is super important for sure.
Yep. And then working as a team to help care and recognize that we all need to self-maintain ourselves too. I myself, I go sit in the woods. I hunt. I go shoot stuff because it's just, I unplug, I turn my cell phones off. I just take 8 hours to myself to go sit in the woods and just be with nature, because that's just something what I do. I also, once in a while, I'll call people and just to get stuff off my chest, because my brain is constantly working. I feel like I work 7 days a week because of everything going on in my brain. So calling and talking to people and figuring it out and working again together as a team is huge to take care of ourselves and do self-maintenance.
That's excellent. We really appreciate you guys coming on. We're gonna move now to Beth and hear about some of the recommendations of the Caregiver Task Force. So, but it's really important for us to hear from caregivers, because we do need more caregivers. So I think it's just important for you all to talk about it, how important it is, and what great advocates you are for the people you're serving. So I know that, yes.
Then before we go, and thanks by the way for having us. This goes back to, won't take long, goes back to my time, spent some time working with folks with dementia and providing meaning and purpose to their lives. And I can't remember, I wish I could take credit for this, but somebody, I can't remember who said it, but they said when you're looking at your going to work as a caregiver in your role, they said instead of looking at it as killing time, try to look at it as making time live. Find a way to make time live. So, all right, that's it.
No, that's perfect. That's a great way to wrap it up. So please stay on, and you can listen to what Beth has to say about what the recommendations are, because these are things that could affect you going forward, and some important things and good things too. So I'm gonna turn it over to Beth and Caitlin, and they're gonna work on sharing the report, and Beth's gonna talk about the recommendations.
Thanks, Sally. And again, thanks, Eric, Cody, and Steph for just sort of putting a human face on how important this work is, and how critical it is, not just, as you said, to support that person, but really to be that conduit and bridge for people with disabilities and older adults back to their community. So that is just so important. This work is some of the most important work that's being done out there. And sadly, the compensation and the benefits don't reflect just how valuable the work is. So, so just to give you a little bit of background on the Governor's Task Force on Caregiving, one of the first executive orders that Governor Evers issued almost 2 years ago was to create a task force to really look at how serious this issue is, and to come up with very proactive recommendations to support paid caregivers throughout Wisconsin, where there's a dire shortage, but also to support family caregivers or unpaid caregivers, because of course, when we can't recruit enough paid supports, then the burden on families, of course, is very great as well. So, it's sort of a domino effect. So that task force was named by the governor. He appointed 29 people back in September of 2019, and we met for over a year. We're actually still meeting even now that the report is finished, just to continue to promote it, and to because we very much want many of these recommendations in this report to get into the governor's budget. And then once it's in the budget, we'd also like the legislature to agree and approve it, so that we can get some very needed things changing in our state. And of course, as the three caregivers mentioned, their lives and the kinds of tasks they're doing have changed so much during COVID. COVID has just shown an extra serious spotlight on how critical the need for caregivers is. And then, what happens when we don't have enough caregivers in the state, and, how it really impacts the health and safety and really the very lives of people with disabilities and older adults who depend on them. So back in early October, the governor's task force report was issued. I worked in the paid caregiver. We had two subcommittees. Lisa Pugh last week talked about the unpaid caregiver task force or subcommittee and their recommendations. And then I was on the paid caregiver group, and we worked, in small teams. And one of the first things that we really looked at were the rates. And that is on page 11 of this report. But one of the number one things that we hear around caregiver shortages is like our three caregivers mentioned, the work is very rewarding. We're clearly attracting a lot of people who deeply care and who want to do a good job and make a difference in their communities. And yet the wages are not nearly enough to, reflect the importance of the work, or even really to be career sustaining wages. So we've been looking at different ways that we can improve the wages, but also the public or the benefits for people, so that folks in Wisconsin can see caregiving as a career that has a ladder and that can lead, to elevated wages and leadership opportunities and that sort of thing. So the first thing that we in the paid caregiver recommendations is rates, and we are recommending that the state go through a very rigorous rate band analysis to look at where the state has not kept up in rates, and where we would need to go to, especially for the lower tier workers, the workers who are doing those direct supports and are probably on the lower wage end of the provider network, that we can really improve that. And so we have a lot of recommendations around how to do it, to go forth with a very careful analysis, looking at other states, looking at what the real cost of care should be, ensuring that no worker would get under $15 an hour, because we know that that's really the minimum needed, in order to sustain and pay your bills. So that's the recommendation around rates. And we're hoping to put together rate bands that would have minimums that would be tied to the consumer price index. So there's increases every year. And that they also assure that minimum $15 an hour, and then have built-in increases over time. So that's kind of our recommendation around rates. And we want it to be a transparent process. We want people to know how much providers are getting, so that it's much more transparent. Right now in our managed care system, they're sort of negotiated privately, and we'd like to see something much more transparent about that. So that's some reform around rates. We also had something similar around nursing home workers that would also assure that, market rates and the true cost of care is reflected. So that was the nursing home recommendation. And then if we can go further, we also we're looking at, if you can just keep scrolling down a little farther, Caitlin, then number 8 there you can see is, it's kind of a technical term, but we want to make sure that most of the costs of family care are going into, if you could go up to the medical loss, oh, here it is, medical loss ratio, thanks. That most of the costs that are spent on family care actually go directly to the providers who are doing the most hands-on care. So we're making a recommendation that managed care, at least 85% of the direct care costs would go into those direct supports, and that administration and case management would be no greater than 15%. And then we also had a recommendation number 9 around a direct care worker fund and reform around how that's administered, so that those direct care funds, if the legislature approves it, would be able to go toward permanent increases in wages and not just sort of a bonus or a one-time payment, which is right now kind of how it's operated in the state. So those were kind of some of our ideas and recommendations to get us to a more fair, livable wage rate for workers. And then Caitlin, if you could just go down a little bit, we also, to number 10, we looked at what are the ways that we can also get benefits for workers. So some direct support providers in the state do get benefits, an awful lot don't. And in fact, somewhere between 35 and 40% of Wisconsin's caregivers actually are already on Medicaid, and that's how they get their health insurance. And we know that that is actually, for some workers, meaning that they're actually having to choose to work fewer hours per week so that they can stay under the income cap in order to be eligible for Medicaid. So we really wanted to work on those benefits for workers. One of the things that we think would be most impactful is Medicaid expansion. We're one of the few states, there's only a handful of states left in the country that have not accepted Medicaid expansion from the federal government. That would infuse hundreds of millions of dollars into the state. And one of the big benefits of Medicaid expansion is it would bump eligible participation from 100% of the poverty level to 120% of the poverty level, which means if you're a direct care worker and you're already on Medicaid to get your health insurance, that you could actually work up to 1 shift a week or up to 8 hours more per week and still keep your health insurance benefit. So we see a real direct connection between Medicaid expansion and getting benefits and expanding the number of hours available for caregivers in the state that they can work. And then another proposal that we came up with is what you would call an earnings disregard for direct care workers that would disregard, like say the first $10,000 of their income. And again, that allows them to work and earn more and still be eligible for Badger Care, and some of the other direct care or direct public programs like a child care subsidy and some of those, and food share. So again, a disregard would allow workers to earn more. It would allow them to work more hours and still be eligible for some public benefits that could support them and their families. Okay. So then we also worked on a way to really create a career ladder for workers so that they aren't earning the same amount of money and doing the same tasks forever. So direct care workers oftentimes don't get a wage increase every year. Sometimes it can be years before they get an increase. And so we wanted to develop professional training that has tiers or a ladder in it so that as you got more training, you would be eligible for a higher wage. So that is one recommendation around that. And then with that, we also wanted to do some direct targeting and recruitment of people that might be interested in the field and get them into that kind of a career ladder. So recognition and recruitment could look at different strategies to reach into high schools or college students. You know, you heard from Eric that he first learned about caregiving as a career in college. A lot of people say, young people say they didn't even know that it was a field of work that was available. So we had some recommendations around that. And then another one was a background check policy. So in our IRIS program right now, there is a more rigorous requirement when doing background checks than in family care. And what we were hearing from some families were that they had a great neighbor or relative or somebody they knew very, very well, and they would be a great caregiver. And then it turned out that when they did the background check, that maybe they had, you know, a conviction 20 years ago, or they had some sort of, you know, legal criminal type of activity that was maybe unrelated completely to their efficacy as a caregiver, and it was stopping them from being able to be even considered as a caregiver. And this was something that it's especially concerning in Wisconsin's communities of color. We have a disproportionate number of people of color who have experienced some kind of altercation or some sort of involvement in the criminal justice system. And so a huge number of people are being deemed ineligible. So we want to make sure that people who are getting cares are safe, and that those caregivers are carefully scrutinized, but we also don't want to disqualify people who would be good. So there was some reforms around the background check policies as well. So, and then the final thing was just getting rid of some of the financial penalties for providers that were, especially some of our smaller providers who maybe don't have professional accountants and may have numerical errors. And as a result, in the current system, they're getting financial penalties that's really impacting their ability to stay in business. So we did some reforms around that. So those were kind of the paid caregiver recommendations in the report. And the final thing I would say about it is just that just because the report is out and we're talking about it doesn't mean that any of this will necessarily be adopted without advocacy. So I think right now is a great time. You know, we've had elections for our state legislators last week. And now, you know, as we're going into the winter and the governor's considering his budget, it's a great time to connect locally with your legislator. It can be a phone call, you know, or Zoom or whatever, and really share those caregiving stories and the need for recommendations to support our caregivers in the state, both paid and unpaid. I think those stories, the examples that our three panelists had, those are really important for legislators to hear right now. And we just have to keep this drumbeat going to make sure that the recommendations here become a reality.
That's great. That was going to be my follow-up questions. What can people do? So that's good to know. And, you know, we, you know, a lot of work went into that report and those recommendations. So got to make sure that they move forward. So
yeah, and I don't know if Lisa mentioned to you, but we got over 1,500 public comments, like 1,500 written public comments. So you can tell that this is an issue that people really care about. But an awful lot of those comments did come from providers, you know, and the general public. Who we didn't hear as much from is the direct caregivers themselves with their stories. And I think those stories are the things that policymakers really remember. You know, they remember Eric, the guy who went into quarantine for 2 weeks and supported somebody, you know, while they were sick. Or, you know, they remember the person who says, you know, when no other essential worker could support this group home, you know, I was able to go in, and as a result, you know, people could stay in their home and they didn't get disrupted. So I think those stories are really, really important. They've never been more important to really drive home these policy recommendations, because you know, a lot of them will require funding, and we're going to have a really tough budget with COVID, you know, in consideration. I don't think it's impossible that these can get passed, but they're going to need a drumbeat from all corners of the state.
Well, and I think too, with COVID, it just has shown, you know, the importance of caregivers and how, you know, the lack of caregivers can really impact, you know, people's lives. So we need more caregivers, we need better benefits, better pay, all of those great things. Thank you so much, Beth. We really appreciate you joining us today, and our great caregivers from Headwaters. We really appreciate it. This was an excellent Living Well Wednesday. We will be back next week. We're going to be talking about aging caregiver, family caregivers, and sibling caregivers. So we'll have some guests from Love Inc. We'll also have a parent, and then we'll be joined by Harriet Redmond from Wisconsin SIBS. So we're excited. And
Sally,
yes.
There was a question in the chat for Facebook about whether there's a union for caregivers. And I think that some caregivers do belong to like SEIU and some of the unions, but most don't. But there is a professional organization, WIPSA, the Wisconsin Personal Services Association, that has also put out a survey recently to kind of get the experiences of caregivers across the state. So WIPSA would be my recommendation to connect with to learn more about what the professional personal services folks are doing. There's also 2 professional organizations for for employment providers like Headwaters. One is called, what is it? Lisa, Shannon, help me out. One's APSI
Yes, it's
and
the
the other is
Disability Services Provider Network.
DSPN. Yeah,
Mhm.
DSPN,
Yep.
Disability Service
Provider Network.
Network.
So
Mhm.
those are all professional organizations that advocate, on their own, that I encourage people to get connected to.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up for today. We really appreciate you joining us. And we will see you next week at the same time.